So welcome to the Apostolic Chambers August on call with Zim Ugochukwu. I'm going to unmute you, Zim, but there we go. I see you. I don't hear you.
All right.
Oh, now I hear you now.
Hey, doing all right.
All right, so that doesn't look like a boring office where you're sitting there having spent the last 8 hours chugging away at work. No?
Well, Starbucks now, they start playing this music and it's like super loud. It's like, where can I go? It's quiet. But now there's like the cicadas. So wherever I go, there's this noise apparently. So bye.
Good times. Well, we're going to put a link to your bio in the chat so people have a little information on you. There's so much that I want to talk about that I don't want to spend any time on that. I did notice, though, a couple of posts from you about what do I do? What does Zim do? And I had to chuckle about it because I realized that I had the same struggle, and as I've talked about, hey, we're going to have Zim on, and they're like, great, what does she do? And I'm like, well, I know what she does because I've read her bio, but so tell us, Zim, what do you do?
Gosh. So I do a lot of different things. I am a writer. I write on Medium a lot of times via email. So in my previous company, I did a lot of writing about. Hey.
So I think I messed up a setting that when people join, they're not muted. So I'll be muting them as we go. I think.
It's all good. We're all family. And so I write. So I've got this book coming up. I am a worship singer at church, and I work with my pastor and first lady on like marketing, behind the scenes stuff at church. I'm a teacher. I love teaching about business. I love teaching about the Word of God. I'm an entrepreneur, so I work for myself. I own a small Korean company, so a small South Korean company, and I consult with small business owners, and I own a business that acquires other businesses, and then I invest in real estate. So it's like a lot of like things. I feel like when I had my one company, it's very simple in saying I'm the CEO of this one company, but now that I'm not that anymore, I have all these different things.
So have you met Oprah?
I did, yeah, a couple years ago.
Yeah. Was it fun? Tell us about that.
Yeah, no, it was fun. It was, so she had this list that she kind of put together. She called it Super Soul 100, and it was about 100 people who were elevating humanity. That was the kind of the whole umbrella thing. Mm-hmm. And so she had it at her studio. So at the time I was traveling. I was in South Africa, and in true Oprah style, I think we found out maybe like a week before. So there was absolutely no lead time to go there. But I made it. And so yeah, it was cool. So it was a list. We kind of check in with each other. We've checked in with each other over the years, and it's been a really cool kind of experience.
Interesting. So here's a question for you. So you've been recognized by Forbes 30 Under 30, which gets 16,000 nominations, and they're like, hey, out of 16,000 people, we want to profile Zim. You've been recognized by the New York Times, CBS, right? The Nation, Essence, NPR, just all of these accolades. And then arguably you come to the world that's most important to you, the apostolic world, right? Because church is all-encompassing for you. And nobody knows who you are. How do you come to terms with the fact that you have 40,000 Instagram followers who want to hear what you have to say, recognize the accomplishment that you've had of your resume, and then you come to a church pew and you're anonymous, and people are like, hey, will you huck these chairs for us?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. How do you come to terms with that?
I think as a generation, I think we are especially like the millennial, Gen Z generation, we are obsessed with being on stage or being well known. And I love what Brother Brown said at Congress, right? Obedience is better than prominence. And so one of the cool things about the HarperCollins book deal was that when they reached out to me, they said that the most fascinating thing for them was the fact that my audience did not consist of believers, that there were the church and the unchurched who had followed me. And so I saw that as an extremely humbling opportunity, that I have been given this platform to be able to kind of reach the lost and minister to people that others may not have the opportunity to. So I am okay with being unknown, you know, in the church world. What was more important, and what is more important to me, is how I use what God has given me and what God has gifted me with to reach those who don't know Him. And I also want to say that being known isn't my focus, right? If you think about Esther, right? Esther was unknown. She was an orphan, right? She was completely unknown. If you think about David, David was unknown and overlooked. If you look at Rahab, prostitute, overlooked, but they ended up being used of God in such mighty ways. And so I think that in their case, being known was a result of their own obedience, because they stayed the course, because they didn't give up when things got hard. And so when I think about the next revival, it's going to take first generation apostolics. It's going to take third and sixth and seventh generation apostolic. It's going to take all of us working together for His kingdom and for His glory. And so I'm okay, you know, if I'm, you know, not known, if I'm, you know, moving pews and whatever, that's absolutely okay, because I'm just here to serve, just here to do what God has called me to do. And if through that He gives me a platform, good. If not, good. You know, at the end of the day, I'd rather be known to Him and unknown to other people.
So great thought, but if I don't know you, you can't impact me. How does that work?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I guess in theory, if you don't know somebody, you can't impact them. But I don't know. I guess other people in your circle who may know me or may not know me can be impacted by me as well. And at the end of the day, I think we're all assigned people to minister to, right? There's no possible way that I can reach everybody on this entire planet, right? There's no possible way that you can reach everybody, or anybody on this call can reach every single person, but God assigns to us people for the seasons that we're in. And if it's not meant for me to reach you, then, you know, maybe it's meant for somebody else to reach you. And I'm just doing whatever God has me to do. I'm staying in my particular lane, and I'm reaching the people that He's assigned to me for the time.
Okay, so great thought. So you build this boutique travel company. You get it up to 2 million monthly subscribers that are interacting with you on a weekly basis. All of you know, the Forbes and Oprah and these folks are seeing what you do, and you just head off to NAYC, listen to a sermon, bam, sell the company. Big decision. How do you know it was God telling you to do it, right? Because this is your whole world. Not your whole world as in like I go report to this for 40 hours a week. This is your whole world. And you just decide based on a word that you heard. This isn't, hey, someday I'm going to the mission field. This is, I think you said it's something like 45 days later, you're in the process of selling it. How do you know that was God?
Well, I think for me, it was like a mixture of different things that I could probably talk for hours about. But I think that I always like to talk about the book of Jonah and how the Bible says God appointed or prepared a fish for Jonah. And so when I think about where I was at that time, I feel like God had orchestrated a particular circumstance in my business that would not have happened otherwise, right? So it was a mixture of that. It was a mixture of where I was with my relationship. And I think I had come to NAYC, I think like the most broken that I had ever been. And it was my very first one. I'd never been to NAYC before. Didn't know what to expect. And so I went there, and I remember Brother Jackson's message, him talking about success and sacrifice. And I said, God, if you want this business, it's yours. It was something that, it's hard to explain, but it was something that had moved me so. It was confirmed. There's just like all of these different circumstances that aligned just so. At 45 days later, we sold the company. So it wasn't that we had started the process, it was that we sold it. And the only thing that I asked of God was if this was something that he wanted, to make it easy, to make it a smooth process, and an easy, smooth process to sell the company. It was. Doesn't mean it wasn't without pain. It wasn't without all of that stuff. It was still hard. It was still very difficult. But that's kind of how I knew.
So the doors opened, and you went through the doors as they opened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've made this decision. So did you make the final decision sitting in the stadium in Indianapolis? I mean, when was that final decision? Yes, I've heard the voice of God. I'm turning my life around and selling this company. When was that decision?
I don't remember the exact day, but it was in the stadium. It was in the Indianapolis stadium. I don't know if it was right there during the message. I think it was percolating. But then one of the breaks, I can't remember, I was like upstairs talking to somebody, and she had asked me, this was the person that bought my company. She had asked me if I wanted to sell. And I said, yeah, I'll sell. And I had a lot of peace about it. And she was shocked. And she moved all heaven and earth to buy the company. And so, it was easy. Just as I had asked God to make it.
So who did you tell first?
I told her first. And then I can't remember when I told my pastor, because we had all come up as a church, and he knew what was going on. And so I told him first, and it was really challenging because I had to have some of these conversations at NAYC with my team, remote, over the computer, like, hey, we're gonna sell the company, and I had to see their faces, and then also, being as broken as I was, had to get up and go to NYC for our lives to be turned millions of different ways by the preachers that were on the platform. So it was just a lot. It was a lot.
So how many staff members at this point were involved in the company?
7 or 8, I think.
Okay. And I'm assuming not all of them are apostolic believers and sitting on the church pew right next to you. So how do you explain a God thing to people that aren't going to get it right? Because these people are putting their blood, sweat, and tears in it. They're right alongside of you in the trenches, and suddenly you get this harebrained revelation while you're off at some conference, and now you're turning everybody's life upside down.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
So the conversation, I don't think I explained it to them. I didn't go in depth and detail, because at that point, I was sure in the direction that I was going. And so I didn't tell them all of the behind the scenes and the crying. I didn't tell them all that. But between selling the company and raising money, I told them that we're gonna sell the company, and they were not happy about it. at all. On a scale from 1 to 100, they're probably a negative 50. So, you know, having to deal with that on top, it was just, that whole summer was just a hot mess of emotions. But I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So, but God, I'm just saying back then, not now.
Yeah. Oh. So to our participants on the call, I'm opening up the chat. So if you guys have a question, feel free to shoot it in the chat, and we'll get Zim's thoughts, because we want to know what you guys think as well. So a common theme throughout the Bible is seeking counsel from elders. And it's really easy to go to my pastor and say, hey, give me some advice about ministry. Maybe my pastor went to Bible school, maybe he didn't, but he's got some experience in ministry and in serving God. Yet, you know, pastors are, you know, charged with offering counsel in life. And so you're in a world where, you know, you don't have a lot of I'm not going to say peers, but shall we say, you know, godly counselors who have experience with these types of things. So I'm assuming your pastor has never sold a big company like this and followed your path. And so how do you find godly counsel in situations where they're not going to have the depth of understanding of the ins and outs of the situation?
Yeah. I think that even though the intricacies of the circumstance weren't really all that familiar, there are still foundational principles. So I am extremely blessed to be a part of International Christian Fellowship. My Bishop Rick Gonzalez, is a first generation apostolic. And so what that means is that when I walk into his office to talk to him about all of these very strange, weird things happening in my life, and all these accolades and all these things and all these issues and all these challenges that I'm having, he has always known the power of difference, because he was different. He came from a very interesting background. He used to be a cop. I mean, just like all of these different things. And so he knew the power of difference. So I would go into his office. Maybe I would sit in there like every week or every week and a half or something like that. And I would just talk to him. I would cry. And he would always tell me and encourage me in who God had created me to be. Right. And so I would tell him how, you know, strange and weird I felt and how I didn't fit in the box. And like, as a pastor's wife, I wouldn't be able to do X, Y, and Z. And he would always say, be who you are. Right. And so I'm so thankful that during that period of time in my life, and even still, my entire church family celebrates everybody's differences and what they can bring to the kingdom of God. And they don't try and fit us into this kind of like narrow box, if there is a narrow box. And so when it comes to godly counsel and godly wisdom, I have always gone to them. My bishop's wife is like the 5th or 6th generation apostolic, and he's 1st generation apostolic. And so his power is in relating to people that are very, 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 very different from him, like murderers, ex-cons, like the people, just very different people. But that is his strength. That is who God has blessed him to minister to. And so given that I'm able to kind of talk to him about some of these challenges of my difference, it has been kind of a reprieve, just like a safe space. Oh, you're on mute, Don. Or I'm on mute. No, I'm not on mute. He doesn't hear me.
All right. Can you hear
there
me
we
now? Okay.
Yeah, there we
okay.
go.
So that's great. That worked for you. But I excel in my career. I'm in a rural church. My pastor is a great guy. but he didn't graduate from college. Has been in ministry all of his life, and so he doesn't have those experiences. What advice would you give me?
You know what? Honestly, I think that we often overlook the power of community, right? And the power of being around a community of godly people. Like you can't take all the advice that people throw at you. And these days, honestly, looking for doctrinally sound things on the internet is like a trap sometimes, right? And so for me, it has been important to stay in my community, even though they may look a lot different than or they may have different experiences than I do. So for instance, at my church, I'm the only one there that does what I do. And growing up the way that I've grown up, I have become very comfortable with being different. I'm always the different person. It's without fail, I've just always been different. And so for me, it has never been that much of an issue or that much of a challenge to kind of insert myself. Sounds kind of aggressive, but it hasn't been much of a challenge to make friends with people and meet them where they are. You know, I think some people will introduce themselves with what they do, but I think we should always introduce ourselves with who we are. And so that leaves room to create a really strong foundation with different people, because even though your pastor may not be able to relate to you at all, you should be able to find some people somewhere that can point you to the things of God when it comes to what you're struggling with.
Okay. So you mentioned you should be able to say who you are, as opposed that's different than from what you do. So who are you?
I am a lover of God. I am a daughter. I'm a future wife. I am a weird, quirky individual that likes getting lost in cities. I love travel. I mean, I can go, how long should I go? I can go on. Forever.
Which none of that says I'm an entrepreneur. So question from the audience. So you mentioned how when you notified your team that you're selling the company, they were upset. How did you steer the group into agreement to make it a successful transaction, especially when to them it probably seemed like a spontaneous decision?
Yeah, well, didn't all come to agreement, but the thing about that company was I was the sole owner. So being the sole owner, I didn't necessarily need anybody else to agree in order to sell the company, right? So if I wanted to sell the company, I didn't necessarily need to have them agree. Now, if I wanted to bring them into kind of into the new existence of the company with our acquirer, then obviously they'd have to have some agreements, but none of them came over, right?
Oh,
they
wow.
all resigned before the transaction closed. So that was really hard, because these are people that I've spent 4 years building a business with. They resigned before the transaction closed. I have not talked to them since. They don't want anything to do with me. So it was a really challenging experience. And there are things that I did wrong or that I didn't do right. I'm a very non-confrontational person. So whenever there's an issue, I just avoid it like the plague. And so it was just a really challenging time period. And then to go from that to the company that bought us, that then started to change a lot of the things in the business. I didn't have my team to kind of lean on anymore, right? It was just me, and here I was, somebody who sacrificed it all for God, and I had a daily reminder to keep my emotions in check from yelling at everybody. I developed some fruit of the spirit there, and so it was challenging. So there was no like kumbaya agreeing moment or anything like that.
So from the outside looking in, you sold your company, rode off into the sunset. It was easy and it was wonderful. And it's not about sacrifice. This was your payday. But you're saying
Yeah.
it wasn't that way.
Well, so here's the thing. Whenever somebody sells a company now, I'm always like, should I congratulate them or should I mourn with them?
Right.
Because as a founder, you built this thing from scratch and you're selling it to a company that is probably going to change it into something you may not recognize anymore. And while yes, you get paid and it is a blessing to be paid and to have been paid, your identity, if you're a founder, and this is also pretty dangerous, your identity was wrapped up in this business, right? It became who you were. For me, I was the travel girl, right? I was always everywhere, always traveling. And my business was me. My business was an extension of who I was. So then when I sold it and they started manipulating it and changing things around, then I was like, it was a very personal experience, because I felt like everything that I had built was just shattering. It was rough, John. It was rough.
So do we congratulate you or mourn with you?
Congratulate me, because at the end of the day, it was something that needed to be done. And, God doesn't promise this very easy, cushy, comfortable life at all, And so if I had not sold the company, I would not be where I am now, wouldn't have the book deal, wouldn't have the podcast, wouldn't have any of that stuff, because my identity was wrapped up in that particular business. So it took sacrificing that. Sorry, that was a tow truck. Can you believe it?
Not towing you.
I thought it was a motorcycle. I said, what's that? Anyway, so it took that, me sacrificing that in order to get where I am now. So you can congratulate me, please. Hoorah.
Congratulations. So when I saw your original post about the HarperCollins deal, I was actually at a dinner with Brother Bernard, and I thought, that's pretty cool. I wonder who else has had major book deals with big publishers, because everybody goes to Pentecostal Publishing House, and anybody can be an author today. So I know lots of authors, and so I reached out to the authors that I know, and I'm like, hey, who do you know that's had a deal with the big publishing house? And everyone, including Brother Bernard, was like, I don't know of any apostolics that have had a deal with a major publishing house. And so you're the first that I know. So I've got to ask, did you write the book and you sent it out to 500 publishers and 499 said no, and HarperCollins was like, yes? Tell me about that.
So, okay. So back when I was selling my company, I took a trip to Italy. I took a last minute trip. I needed to get away to this monastery hotel. And I remember at that monastery hotel, God impressing on my heart to talk about lukewarmness, being lukewarm, hot or cold. And out of that, the Bloom podcast was born. So this is a podcast that it's on like Spotify and all those the major places. But the concept of it was that people would write in, they would write letters, and I would take those letters, pray about it, seek counsel from my first ladies who would look at it, make sure that it was all good. And I would record these podcasts based on the Word of God. And that we had some pretty like meaty, kind of heavy subjects. And a year later, I went on a trip to Barcelona, and I told myself, I said, I'm going to outline a book. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to outline it. I think I know what it is that God wants me to write or teach. So I went to Barcelona. I spent a day trying to put an outline together, and I was like, forget it. I was like doing all of the like coursework, and I was like, this is hard. So then I said, you know what, God, I'm just going to put this down, and if a book is what you want, then a book is what you'll get, but I'm going to stop kind of forcing my hands. I put it down. Didn't reach out to any publishers. in February of this year, I get an email, a very random email to my podcast email, the one where you submit to ask questions. And it was basically from a woman her title is the acquisitions editor. And she reached out and she said, hey, I don't know if this is the right place to reach you, but I'm wondering if you're interested in working with HarperCollins on a project. I can't remember exactly what the email said, but I was like, I remember getting that at a coffee shop and I just started crying because I had asked God for something. I can't remember what I asked him for in the car. And I was at this coffee shop and this email popped in my inbox. Turns out after a conversation that this acquisitions editor grew up Pentecostal.
What?
Imagine, I was like, what? I actually think her parents were Pentecostal. She's no longer apostolic, but she said that she still like holds to some of the doctrine. And so that's kind of how the conversation began. And by this time, I already had an idea of what I wanted to write. I already had an outline, right? I started the outline in Barcelona, but I put it down. I was just like, I'm just gonna put this here. And if it's whatever you want, then there you go. And so that's how it all happened. So in fact, one of my goals for this year was to get a publishing deal, but it was going to be all on my own,
like a desktop publishing sort of thing.
No.
No.
I was going to be reaching out to like the publishers. I'm going to have like my whole thing and will you buy my book? And God was like, no. So that's how it happened. It came completely out of the blue, and we spent, gosh, I don't know how long, kind of just like working through all of the details. And I think that the topic kind of centers around this one theme, and the theme is, who are you when what you've identified yourself with is no longer there? Right? So I
didn't understand that at all. Say that again.
You didn't understand it?
I didn't understand that.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna say it again. All right, you ready? You listening?
I'm ready. I'm listening.
Okay. So who are you when what you've identified yourself with is no longer there?
Okay.
So it's a book, and I can't say too much about it, but it's a book on identity.
Okay.
And it's a book about starting over. And so I'm excited about it because I think that a lot of people kind of struggle in the area of like identity, right? So if I have this job but now I don't have it, who am I? Or if I moved out of this city to a new city, who am I? Or if I lost all my friends, who am I? And so it kind of centers around that. And I also, one cool thing that came out of this kind of deal is that I got one of the most well-respected agents in the book publishing industry, Christian book publisher. She's an OG. She's been around, I think, publishing books for like 20 or 30 years. And it's been, my mind has kind of been blown just by this whole process.
Did you just call this lady the original gangster? Is that what you just said?
I said the OG. The OG, you gotta abbreviate it to bring it down just a little bit.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I just actually threw that out there because I wanted to make sure people knew that I knew what that was.
Okay.
And I only know that because I got kids. So.
Your kids should know. And OG is like an old school, like early 90s, 80s thing, I think. Maybe.
I don't think it's that old. Because I'm an 80s, 90s thing, and so it's new to me. Anyway, sidebar there. So when will I see it at Barnes & Noble?
So the book will be out, I think, either end of next year, beginning of the year after. Yeah.
So we're talking 20 or 21?
20, yeah, 20 or 21, yeah.
All right, you got to sign my copy when I buy it from you.
I got you, bro.
But if I'm in line at a book signing, I'm cutting the line, just so you know.
Okay. I won't pretend like I don't know you. I'll be like, okay.
Oh, that way my kids will think I'm cool. They'll know how cool I am. There we go. So, So I've heard you say before that in your family, you're a doctor, you're an engineer, or you're a failure. So your family has this definition of success, and they've got it all in this box, a very prestigious box, but a box nonetheless.
Right.
In all of our interactions together, looking at your resume, having cloned a gene, we didn't even talk about any of that. I can't ever imagine a box that you could be in.
Yeah.
In fact, if I'm thinking about, hey, I need some out-of-the-box thinking, you're who comes to my mind. Talk to me about thinking outside the box, because as young professionals, as people that are excelling in their career, usually staying in the box is what's rewarded, right? If I'm too far outside the box, it's hard to, for people to compare. So it's hard for me to succeed, but I still want to stand out.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the box and your seeming amazing ability to stay outside the box.
So I think that we all have these really interesting, unique experiences, all of which God can use for his glory. So for instance, there was a time in my life where I had 4 jobs at one time, right? I was a nanny, I was selling sunglasses. I mean, I don't know what I was doing, but this was in San Francisco. I was just doing a lot. And all of my experiences, even though they seem very unrelated, I'm able to connect with people who have been there. I'm able to talk to somebody who worked at the sunglass store. I'm able to talk to somebody who has held multiple jobs at one time. And so I think a lot of our challenge as people is understanding that we can be multi-passionate. We can be passionate about many different things and still be effective. In fact, when you think about children, when children go to school, and even like growing up, how many of us wanted to fit in? Like, oh, we wanted so bad to be like everybody else. We wanted to have the shoes, or we wanted to, I don't know, dress the same. Just me? Okay, I don't know. But we wanted to be the same. But now what you see happening is that do you have a different idea? Do you have a different way that we can approach this? Have you seen something in another industry that you can bring to this industry that can make a difference or an impact? People are starting to get rewarded for thinking unconventionally. And it's something that I think starts with curiosity, right? So sometimes I'll just walk up and down the street, or I'll just walk and I'll say, oh, like, why is that way? Why? And these are just very weird questions. Keep in mind that I am very weird, but I will ask, like, why is the sidewalk the height that it is? Or why are these trash cans this color? Or I just start asking really different, interesting questions to train myself and to continue to train myself to think very differently. And so if you have a skill that is different than, what your industry requires, I say that there is a way that you could bring that skill to the table. There are things that you learn playing guitar that you can apply to playing piano, or things that you've learned driving a car that you can apply to something else, or things that you've learned selling lemonade as a child to whatever marketing campaign that you have. I think there comes a time where we have to be bold in our difference, right? We have to be bold in who God has created us to be, and bring that 100%. Because God doesn't get the glory if we hide it, if we don't cultivate it, if we don't do anything about it, if we just kind of bury it, right? The parable of talents, then it can't be used, right? So that's kind of what I have to say about outside of the box thinking. Like, if anybody was at NAYC when brother Tuttle, okay, he was preaching about the top rafters, right, that were empty. What unconventional, out of the box way or out of the box thinking do we need to do to fill those top rafters, right? It's going to take all of us. first generation, fourth generation, fifth generation apostolics to do the work, and it's going to take some out of the box thinking. We can't all just have kids and hope those kids fill those top rafters, right? Like we're going to be bringing people in from the outside, but that's going to have to take some unconventional out of the box thinking.
Awesome. So I'm about to bring in a question in from the audience, but before I do, just wanted to throw out to everybody that before we end tonight, I'd like to take a group photo. So for those of you that have not yet, I'm warning you, getting you ready for it. So so those of you that have dialed in on the webinar, just before we end, would love to have you turn your camera on just for a moment, so we can take a group photo. I could take a group photo of just your phone numbers and your names and things. We'll black out your phone numbers so that we're not all calling you at once, but I don't want everybody to think we're just that shy. So anyway, just a little bit of a warning. So question from the audience. So Zim, how do you define success?
How do I define success? I think it's changed. It has evolved.
So give me what it used to be and give me what it is now.
Okay, so I think what success used to be to me was about, that's actually a good question. Am I happy in my business? Do I feel free, right? So time freedom was big for me. Location freedom was big for me. Am I making enough money in my business to do whatever it is that I want to do? That was kind of my definition of success. And by all means, everybody who encountered my old company would look at me and say, that's a successful entrepreneur. And I think that now for me, success is a lot of things. Gosh, this is a hard question. It's freedom. So freedom in Christ. But success is also sacrifice. Like I can't help but to go back to that message by Brother Jackson about success not being what you gain, but what you're willing to give up. And that has rung true for me in so many ways, that in order to be successful, if you think of success in the Bible, everybody who mattered, I mean, everybody matters in the kingdom of God, but when we look back at our examples, our leaders in the faith, we look at people who have sacrificed, right? They left where they knew. They had extreme faith when the odds were stacked against them. So many things, but it all kind of came down to what they were willing to give up, what they were willing to leave behind. And so I think that is more of a definition to success for me now. Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the themes that resonates with me that I hear is, when I'm sitting in church and, I hear a word go out about God blessing and about God moving. Yeah, perfect example is, we've all heard that testimony that I was sitting there in traffic and I was getting frustrated and I didn't know why, but then I got 10 miles ahead and it turns out there was an accident there, and if I hadn't been in traffic, I'd be dead. And we think about God moving in ways like that. Absolutely don't want to invalidate that way in which God moves. But what I heard you talk about is, and just as improbable situation where God's moved things in place. I look back to how you connected with your book deal. That's the story of Joseph. How is it that Joseph just happened to be in the right prison with the baker and the butler, and God connected them, and they had a dream, and 2 years later, that's stuff of scripture. And, again, we often think about that in terms of life and death. We think in terms of that and God moving to save souls, which he does, and that's awesome, and that's, always going to be the primary victory. But he does it in careers as well. It's not just God's gonna, if I get a promotion at work, it's because I'm lucky or because I just happen to show up at the right time. God's moving on your behalf, just as he does in the kingdom world. He does that in our secular career as well. And the theme, though, I hear, and I think that what empowers that is the fact that you put God first. Even though you're an entrepreneur, you're doing all these great things, you're not afraid to go and teach. You mentioned you were a teacher. That means you're in front of, the University of Chicago teaching a bunch of people in a PhD class, or is that you in Sunday school teaching? I'm thinking it's the latter.
No, I don't teach in Sunday school, although I would love to teach the kids. But I teach all over. So if it can be colleges, it could be online, it can be, I do a lot of public speaking. So it's more in the former.
Okay. So talk to me about using all of your gifts, right? So all of the gifts that we've talked about, we've seen the secular success from it, and we've seen it operating in our career. Talk about using all of your gifts in the kingdom.
Yeah. So I think about my experience in marketing, right? I think about my experience in marketing. I think about my experience with graphic design or video editing. These are all very kind of basic things, but those are easily applied to my work at church, for instance. I've been singing since I was a little girl. I've been playing since I was a little girl. Those are all things that, again, are applicable to the church. Everything that I am, everything that I've been, everything that's been cultivated within me, I've been able to use in some way in the kingdom. And it can just be something small, like connecting with somebody, right? If somebody says, hey, I'm from, some small town in some faraway country. If I've been there, you better believe we're going to have a conversation and we're going to grab some of the local tea and we're going to start talking about that place. And so when I talk about bringing all of those gifts, even for people that don't feel like they have, you don't have to have all of the things or do all of the things that I've done. What you have is enough, right? I think sometimes people will look and say oh, she can do all of these different things, but guess what? I can't do the thing that you do better than you do the thing that you do, right? And so I also want to encourage people who are listening in who are like, oh my God, Zim, I've done all of these different things, but I promise you, I cannot be you better than you. And all of the things that you have, whether it's one thing or two things or five things or whatever, are going to be used mightily of God if you make yourself available for God. And so yeah, that's kind of how my gifts play out in the kingdom, but everybody's, gifts look a little bit different.
Great. Well, I greatly appreciate you taking your time this evening. I was getting worried when you were talking about all the things that you're doing today, and I was like, snap, how does she have time for this? I was expecting you 5 minutes in to be like, well, hey, I got to go. I got a call from Korea.
No way.
So I appreciate you taking your time tonight. So how do I follow you? How do I keep track of the going-ons in Zim's life and to know when the book gets released and all that?
Yeah, so the easiest way is my Instagram. It's Zimism, Z-I-M, and then ism, I-S-M, as in Mary, so 2 M's. And my website is just zimism.com. I have this cool page on my website called Now, the Now page. So it's zimism.com/now. And that has all of the books that I'm reading and the courses that I'm taking. And what else? Just projects that I'm working on and things like that. Yeah, so those are the 2 best places.
All right, but you haven't updated it since July 11th.
You gotta give me a break. It's only been 1 month.
All right, just checking.
Okay. All right. Come on, brother.
All right. Oh, you're busy. You're busy. I get it. I get it. All right.
Update it at least if I do it. Sometimes I do it once a month, sometimes once a quarter, depending on what's going on. Because not a lot of things change. I don't read that many books all the time.
There is a lot going on. So, all right. Well, again, thank you. I appreciate your time. So, a couple things as we close out. We will post the recording of this to our social media. We'd love to have you follow us there. I would love if you would please turn your cameras on. Would like to take a group picture. I know that, you know, from the privacy of our own home, we're all hiding. So there's Megan. We got Seth out there. Zim, stay where you're at. But I need your head to stay right where you're at, because if you go to the left or right, that light behind you blinds us. Oh, no. See, now we're blinded.
Oh, okay. Got you. I got you.
All right. So iPad. I can call out iPad because, of course, nobody knows who iPad is. But so I don't know if people are fumbling with it. There's Rochelle. Thank you. Yep, check your hair. I'll give you plenty of notice before we take the picture. Down in the lower left of the Zoom window, it says camera. If you put your mouse down there, you can hit start video. So I don't know if the others are just being shy, or they're all just, if I notice them all hang up, we'll know. So while they maybe are figuring out how to do that, I'll just mention that our next on-call is September 17th with Randy Flewitt. So Randy Flewitt, I'm trying to think how to say this since it's being recorded and he'll see it, or could see it. He's been successful. So he's now retired, has had a very successful career in banking, has a huge spread down here in South Texas. He is the engine behind the Life Springs Entrepreneurial Fund. And so has done some pretty cool things in entrepreneurism, but he's going to be talking about basically the topic I've assigned him is, hey, so I got a lot of money. What does God expect from me? So many of us as young professionals, our career track is on the upswing. And so, you know, we're out of that retail job. And so, you know, what long-term does God expect from us? Okay, so I'm just going to assume that the others are shy, and I'm going to try.
Wait, can I say one thing before we take our photo?
No. Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry, yes.
Brother Seth, I want to tell you that I appreciate you for keeping your camera on, because you laughed at my jokes, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
You do need the feedback.
I do, and like as I was talking and telling jokes, like Seth was laughing, and I was like, okay, there we go. That's good. Okay, that's all.
All right. So I'm gonna throw a picture up, and I'm assuming that since you turned your camera on, you're okay if we publish that. All right, 3, 2. Oh, wait a minute. Just get one of my chins. 3, 2, 1. Okay, that seemed anticlimactic. There was a click there. You just all didn't hear it. So, all right. As we close out, I'm going to throw this over to Seth to talk about Apostolic Chamber Young Professional Program. And so now I need to share.
Are you sharing it to me? There we go. There we go. Sweet. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Seth, and I am a young professional of the Apostolic Chamber of Commerce. I'm taking a little bit of time here at the end to kind of introduce you if you don't know what we're about or what the Young Professional Program is. So what we are is the Chamber. We have a development platform for hyphens and hyphens alike that aren't necessarily called the full-time ministry, but still feel a call to pursue ministry, but yet have secular success. And so the platform that we have here, I'm going to be telling you in 3 steps how you can be a part of it. And then the first step is to create your profile. Tell us a little bit about yourself. If you can go ahead and text join YP to 4747. I thought it would be on the screen here, but as you can see, there's a link to our website, which you can also go there as well to apostoliccoc.org. And once you do that, it should send you back a link that'll take you to our Young Professionals page. There you'll be able to see a little bit more about who we are and what we do as a program and what you should expect. We're all on this journey, and it doesn't have to be a lonely one. We're in it together, and we're all followers of Christ, and yet we're still trying to maintain the apostolic identity And so that's what we want to emphasize as young professionals. So the second step you will do is connect with peers and mentors. As you connect and grow in these networking events that we have here with Zim, a great example of somebody to listen to and just feed off of, as far as taking what she has and applying it to our own. I know as far as the curiosity aspect, I want to apply that to myself. I need to ask myself more questions because so often, more than not, I'm going with the flow and not necessarily questioning it. And I'm going to apply that. I'm going to take that, and that should lead me to my third step, to where we change the world. And as Zim might have mentioned, that it's impossible to reach everyone in the world, but change your world. And creating your influence, as you have success within your career, you also build a sphere of influence of people below you. And here we are channeling that, developing that to create the opportunity for you to change your world. So that's all I got, John, if you want to go ahead and close out.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for your time, Zim. Thanks for your time, Seth, for sharing that. And I want to thank our participants, right? Honestly, this would have just been a great call if it had just been me and Zim sitting here chatting. It's always a blast to be able to catch up with you. I hope to see you on our next on-call, an important topic that I think that we all grapple with. But again, there's not a lot of people that I can talk to about that. So appreciate your time. You guys have a great evening, and look forward to interacting in this community that we're building together. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
I have to figure out how to end it.